Hello and welcome to the Historical Humans podcast. My name is Justin Woods and I am joined by my co-hosts.
Gwendolyn.
And Colum. And together, we are the three heads of Cerberus.
Exactly. Now, do you guys want to go into your background and talk about why we're here and why we're talking about this?
Yeah, of course. My background is in cultural anthropology. I have my BS in cultural linguistics, focusing on Japan and mythologies, and I'm currently working on my master's with that concentration as well.
I am an archaeologist with degrees in anthropology and classical civilizations. Currently working on a master's in historical archaeology. My focus is colonialism, which is always fun. It's not.
And I am also an archaeologist. However, I specialize in community-based collaborative archaeology, working with indigenous communities. And I am already done with my master's and my grad work. So I am no longer working on it.
So lucky.
Yeah, writing a thesis, good fun, but
Just rub that in just a little bit further.
I mean, yeah, it's all good. But background in archaeology, so you got two archaeologists and a cultural anthropologist here, and we're not gonna focus specifically on anthropology or on archaeology. We're gonna have more of a broad range of topics, and what better way to start this off than with our Christmas special.
Yes, of course. Not like we're jumping the gun or anything.
Yeah, no. This is a Christmas special. So, Colum, you want to lead us off? Set the scene, build the world.
All right. So, this year's Christmas special and our flagship topic for this operation is the Christmas Truce of 1914. Now, excuse me. Now, Christmas Truce of 1914 occurred during the first year of World War I, which the more astute of you may have guessed was 1914. At this point in the war had been raging for only 5 months or so at this point, and the death toll was far lower and had seen far fewer of the truly hideous human rights abuses that would occur from the advent of trench warfare on this scale. The Christmas Truce was an extension of two major factors. First was a call by the newly elected Pope of the Catholic Church, Pope, what was his name? I do always forget just a little bit. Pope Benedict the 15th, yes. This was a combination of his call, which was ignored by the governments of the nations fighting in World War I, and another factor which had taken place in the trenches around Belgium, which was a live and let live policy, wherein various soldiers from opposite sides of the lines would quietly ignore the others when men from the other side when they encountered them on scouting missions or attempts to retrieve fallen comrades and things like that, simply on the grounds that there was enough death in the war and two more people shooting each other in the middle of no man's land wasn't really going to help anybody.
Pretty respectable.
Yeah, the fact that they just would not even bother each other is kind of cool.
Yeah,
I like that scouts just like acknowledge that they're scouts and kind of pass each other by. They're trying to get a job done.
It was very lovely. It pissed the commanders off to no end. There were several very strongly worded letters written by various commanders along the front about people letting their guard down and fraternizing and not seeing the enemy as the enemy, but as people, which you know generally is a good thing as a human being, but evidently not so in war.
I mean, also when you stop and think about it, this point in European history is one of the first times in almost its entire history that there were definitive borders. I mean, the German Empire was only established for what, less than 100 years by that point?
I don't think so.
Because the German states
Yeah.
didn't unite till what, the 1860s?
Yes, yeah. Germany, as we know it, came out of the collapse of the Holy Roman Empire following the invasions of Napoleon in the first half of the 19th century. So, within us, this was a nation barely a century old.
Yeah, so I wonder how much of that really plays into it, especially with just how interconnected it always is, with it being the Holy Roman Empire, with there being the Napoleonic empires.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. It was definitely acts of nation building, and honestly, a lot of the that brings up a very good point about borders. A lot of the German troops in the trenches spoke English. They spoke good English. There are accounts of many of them having been living in England prior to the war when their country recalled them to battle. There were two accounts I read about. One was of a soldier on the German side who would climb into a tower just beyond the range of the artillery, and he would call out for for the news from London, claiming to have been the I believe he was something like the head waiter at one of the more elite hotels there.
There you go.
Another account from the Christmas Truce was I believe a German barber gave haircuts to some of his old clients on the English side of the lines,
Interesting.
which is an act of small world.
Although, to be honest, too, the other thing that really makes me think, especially in this situation, is legitimately just how disconnected the soldiers were from the reason that they're fighting. I mean, you brushed briefly upon it about all the alliances that drag these nations into it. I mean, the main battle was fought between France and Germany, even though neither of those are anywhere near Serbia.
Yes, yes. The for those of you who don't know, the outbreak of this war was the assassination of the Archduke of Austria-Hungary, a man named Franz Ferdinand, by Serbian nationalists. The war escalated into World War One when the German nation agreed to back Austria-Hungary in whatever measures it chose to take against Serbia, and Russia chose to back Serbian independence and sovereignty against Austria-Hungary, which brought France into the war as Russia's ally. And it just domino effect, and then Germany invading Belgium to get into France brought the United Kingdom into the war, and it was only a matter of time before other nations that fought, such as Italy and America, were just slowly dragged into the conflict.
Can we just briefly talk about the failed attempt at the assassination? Like the fact that the actual assassination plan completely went to shit within the first like half an hour, and it was only by a random chance that the Archduke was driven down the same street where the would-be assassin was at a cafe.
Oh yeah. Yes, the man who shot Franz Ferdinand, he had given up on his attempt. He had decided it was a botched attempt, so he decided to stop up to the cafe. And well, who should he see just casually driving down the alleyway behind him but the man he's here to kill?
And the assassin is Bogdan Zerjic.
Yes, I believe that is the name, although I do not have it in front of me directly at the moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Although actually, let me double check that.
Yeah.
Pronunciation is something that is a little hard when you're going into this.
Oh no,
Yeah.
no, he was one of the conspirators. The actual assassin was Gavrilo Princip.
Yes, and for those of you who are wondering, the location of this attack was the city of Sarajevo.
Yes.
I have to try very hard not to call it Sarajevo. I pronounce J's very hard, and it is screwed up more than one foreign word.
Oh yes. Oh, that'll do it.
Yeah.
Oh, you and your distinctive accents.
All J's are the same make the same sound as the word Jack.
Jack be nimble, Jack be quick.
My linguistic ears. Okay.
But just the fact that the entire assassination attempt went to shit and still just happened to end up working and to end up just working out. And then the issue where the alliances really get brought in was that Austria-Hungary blamed the Serbian government, even though it was Serbian nationals who did it. Like, it was totally a red herring in that regard. I mean, when you guys learned about World War I, did you learn about mania?
Nope.
No, my history education was not the best in school.
Yeah. My high school neglected anything that wasn't math or hard science.
So, mania, it's an acronym that stands for militarism, alliances, nationalism, imperialism, and assassination. You put all of those together and you have a faux war. Because another thing to keep in mind is most of these European nations had overseas colonies and holdings. At this point, it was primarily Africa that they're fighting over, but a lot of the eastern bloc of Asia as well.
Yeah,
you have those wars happening. Fighting over who got to take over the colonies that were established.
Yes, that's that southeastern Asian sort of colony area. That was a big part of the reason why Japan is actually involved in World War I, as they were seen as a useful tool by Britain and France to attack German seas holdings in that region.
The other thing that
they're like consistent not arguing, but battling with Russia and Korea over their colonies, as well as who gets to have the right over them. That the people living in the colonies will like, today I don't know what citizen I am. We're just gonna try to figure it out.
Add on to that, but I hate both of you, Mom and Dad. If you have about how about how friendly the relationship was.
So are you guys saying that relationship led to Korea lashing out, and thus that is the reason that is the responsibility, or that is the reason we have K-pop, is what you're saying?
I'm not getting into this.
I'm not specifically talking about
through a long string of events.
I don't.
It all correlates.
Listen. Me and my Where's Waldo Santa hat hybrid do not understand what you're talking about, and we refuse to acknowledge whatever logical fallacy you have just used.
It's all of them. I'm using every single logical fallacy.
One that I'm specifically referencing, though the name escapes me, is an island off of I think what is now Russia, which I know does not mean a lot of sense, since Russia is like China and just takes over a lot of territories. But specifically, especially with the colonies and the wars and fighting that would happen over who got to control these colonies, is they would have citizenship in different areas, but if you try to go back to where you came from, depending on the time, you would not be recognized as a citizen because someone else had hold over you at that point. So let's say you're from Japan and you go over to this place to be at this colony to work in like a mine or something, or farming. You try to go back to Japan, Russia has hold over this, you may not technically be allowed back in because you're a Russian citizen now. And it would flip-flop like that. I mean, that obviously depended on other things, especially if you were natively from that place, you were told you were a Japanese citizen, and then you're coming in, and that gets into whole other things. But
That reminds
yeah.
me of something similar but kind of tangential. Is there was a soldier in World War II. His name was Kyung, who was a Korean soldier who, when fighting the Russians, was abducted and forced to fight for the Red Army. Well, he got sent to the to the Western Front there on the eastern side of Germany and got abducted and had to fight for the Germans. This poor man.
Poor man.
Yes, I think it was he ended up with like 4 or 5 different armies by the time the war is over.
Yeah, basically. Poor guy.
The luckiest unlucky bastard in history.
Yes. But to steer back to World War One, we did kind of get off on a tangent.
Yes, so we are coming back to the Christmas Truce in World War One. Fighting's only been going on for 5 months. The Pope is calling for peace. Most of the soldiers are already a little bit chummy, at least between the British and the Germans. Most of the rest of the lines where the French and the Belgians are stationed, they're not really so happy, seeing as how it's their nation that is currently being occupied and under threat of conquest. So they don't really go for this. But for the British and German line, where those 2 points meet, on Christmas Eve, 1914, the shelling stops on both sides, and the British soldiers look across and they see quite an interesting sight, because the Kaiser has sent all of his soldiers little Tannenbaum, little Christmas trees, to remind them of home, which they have been taken along the entirety of their line and lit up.
Can we just talk about how
adorable?
Can we talk about the ridiculousness of just sending Christmas trees? Like, you can send goodie packages, you can send extra snacks or rations. Now, here's a tiny tree for you.
Listen, I mean, technically, they can use that for wood fire when they're done decorating it. You know,
you'd be lucky if you could flush your teeth with that kind of tiny little tree.
I'm just saying, for the amount that he sent, they probably could have like made a nice fire out of it. Just put them on like logs.
Like, sorry about the trench foot, but here's a tree.
They did send other things.
Yeah, they did.
There were many other things sent by both the Kaiser to his soldier and to his soldiers, and from, I believe, Princess Mary on the British side. Mm-hmm. Sent gifts to the British troops. I forget exactly what was in them, but I do recall one of the things I read, a recounting, like in a letter from one of the English soldiers, speaks a little bit of how he, I believe he got a pipe from the British government, and he's writing to his wife about how in his pipe is tobacco. But it's not just any tobacco, it's German tobacco that he got on Christmas Day from a German soldier he had met in the trenches.
Yeah, which I think is really great about the truce, is that they actually gave each other the presents that they got from like the Kaiser and the princess. It's like the gift that they were giving to their soldiers for fighting in this war for them. Was given to the enemy soldiers during that truce, which was so adorable. I do distinctly remember one of the presents being tea, because that was just the most British thing ever. I don't remember which side that was from. It just seemed very British.
Yes, I believe the British got cigarettes and pipes and tea and chocolates too, and I believe the Germans received beer. I know they received beer. They received tobacco, and it was something else, but I can't quite remember. I don't always remember. I don't always remember what all the stuff that was in the gifts.
Yeah, specifically, Princess Mary sent tobacco, cigarettes, and sweets to all the soldiers. I do not remember what the Kaiser sent.
Because this was Kaiser Wilhelm II, which I do also want to point out was a descendant of Queen Victoria. His mother was Victoria's eldest daughter.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, you're right.
Yes. Fun fact with that: all the monarchs of these nations, from Austria-Hungary to Russia to France to England to Germany, any nation with a monarch in this war was essentially a cousin to one another, all descended from Queen Victoria.
Talk about a hell of a family fight.
Oh my god. I mean, when you're dealing with royalty in general, you toss a coin and you'll probably, land on them being related rather than not related,
Yeah. It's amazing though. You pick a fight at your family reunion and 20 million people die.
That's got to make Christmas really awkward.
Also, can you imagine just the descendants going down? It's like, yeah, you remember that? You remember that point in history where family did not get along very well?
Well, let's be honest. By the end of the war, 3 of the monarchs involved were deposed.
Germany for sure. Where
German
Russia.
Kaiser Wilhelm II, the Russian Tsar, and I believe the king of the king of the Austria-Hungary Empire. He didn't so much abdicate as there was no longer Austria-Hungary. The nation he was the emperor of ceased to exist.
I hate when that happens, Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. That the familial aspect really kind of makes it interesting, and I also wonder if that's just part of it, because it almost sounds like a lot of this started off as like I don't really want to fight you, but I signed this piece of paper, so meet in the trench at 5.
Yeah. The war was undertaken with a lot of brevity and this sort of mistaken idea that it was going to be one of these brief minor conflicts, like many of the wars of the past half century had been, which were wars of essentially imperialism, where European troops with machine gun nests fired on charging infantry of indigenous peoples. It was said when the war was declared 5 months prior that it would be over by Christmas. Yet there on Christmas Eve, Germans are lining the trenches with lit Christmas trees, singing Silent Night, and the war's still going on.
But I think an important point to point out with that is this is the first truly industrial war. This is the first real war that we see with introduction of aircraft, chemical warfare, the higher powered utility in rifles. I mean, before...
The tank.
Oh, yeah. So we're seeing all these major advancements, but at the same time, you have counter advancements, but they only go so far. And they effectively put each other at a stalemate, because when you are both massively armed to the teeth, training, it matters, but it doesn't play as big of a role. Especially at this point, later on in the war, you get so many deaths and so many people dying that you're replacing people with less training, with less experience, just because you need the bodies in the spot.
Yeah, and that's a good thing to just bring up, is just the nature of trench warfare. There's a lot of conceptions about it, but basically what it went is there's a shelled out desolate piece of land called no man's land, several feet of barbed wire, and then this thinly manned line on each side of just machine gun nests and snipers looking for kills.
Yeah.
Behind that, connected by little underground trenches and small access points, is another series of about 3 or 4 lines containing the actual garrison, the actual galleys and supplies and storehouses for everything that was needed to survive. So this is a very thinly manned death field that is then densely packed with people just behind just out of range of the sniper.
And if that doesn't sound awful of having snipers trained on your head the second you poke out and just exchanging gunfire all the time, the conditions inside the trenches were fucking awful.
Yep.
Pardon my French, but you had to deal with wet, damp conditions. It would freeze over. You're exposed to the elements constantly. There's so many people that the ground can't dry out and can't get rid of the moisture. So you get trench foot, which is a fungal infection in your feet. These soldiers were dying of disease along with that because of the really trapped nature of it. Like,
Yeah.
Definitely. And sorry, Gwen, you can go.
Which was one of the reasons why this truce was so helpful when they were actually able to make it, because, you know, having that sniper trained on you, some of the people that went to go make these truces along the battle lines, they got killed instantly because you didn't. It wasn't said that these truces were happening. Someone had to step out and do that, and sometimes it was accepted and sometimes it wasn't. But these truces were such a morale boost for these soldiers that were in these horrible conditions, and you know, that for the disciplinary action, because obviously, like, the Kaiser and the princess were not happy about this, and a lot of the you know, higher ups, but for the people that were on the grounds, they saw like how important this was going to be for morale. So no disciplinary action was ever actually taken, even though these truces were not sanctioned.
Yeah. It was a functionally an act of insubordination and desertion that just got swept under the rug. And with the point on trenchfoot, actually, the weather is actually credited with being a big factor in why the truce was able to take place. Because for the month of December 1914, it had rained, and it had rained, and it had rained. And in trench warfare, rain is just as much hell as bullets. And on you know, Christmas Eve, the rain stopped, the ground froze, and it began to snow. And there was something magical to that, to these people who had been trapped in the mud and the sludge and the death, seeing on, you know, this, you know, for them, very holy holiday. The hell was ending.
it was truly a Christmas miracle.
All right, get
Well,
out
you
of
could
the
find a
car.
better saying, or stay
Close
cornier
the
line.
and throw it away.
I'm definitely surprised that I have not seen a Lifetime Christmas movie advertised with this as the setup, because just if I read that in a book, I would have been like, the symbolism, the imagery, not, yeah, I see this actually happening in real life.
No, if you're gonna make it a Hallmark movie, you have to like really up it a notch to where it's like a British soldier during the truce meets a German nurse who's working the front lines.
No.
And
Let's make this shit gay. Let's not neglect people. Let's do it a British soldier,
And a German soldier.
soldier.
Ooh.
All
Hello,
right.
Hans. I really like your accent.
All right.
I'm just saying, I know we got to add the love story for Hallmark, but like,
yes.
you couldn't think of a better thing. So I'm definitely sure that kind of sense of relief for that changing of the weather really shifted people's attitudes.
Well, and then the Christmas caroling, the singing, like I could imagine how magical that must actually be, and I try to think about it from like the humanist perspective, like how humanizing is that to hear the other side singing and celebrating this holiday that you both have in common. You are, after all, kin.
Yeah, fun note on that. One of the British, I believe it was a battalion, that was placed opposite this one regiment that from the Germans that was singing Silent Night.
No.
They actually took it, according to the commander's report, they took it as a challenge to outmarry the Germans and prove that the British had more festive hearts and were more devoted, and to this holiday. They were not going to lose to the Germans, and so the conflict, the competition, shifted from killing to merrymaking. As I believe the British countered Silent Night with First Noel.
So, can we just make that the new toxic masculinity? Get rid of this bullshit, like, dick sizing contest. No. Out-marry each other. Like, I want to see the obnoxious Christmas designs plastered all over the block. Like, two neighbors just going at it with the decorations and everything.
I mean, I actually think there are movies on that. But I know another one of the activities after the caroling was the soccer matches.
Yes.
Or football matches for, non-American people.
Football.
And I do find it interesting that on these later accounts, each side says that they won the soccer matches because that's a point of pride.
Oh, yeah.
But it's thought that the Germans, I think, typically won their games.
So there's a fun fact about that. There are 5 soccer matches that occurred between the Germans and the British troops of like that are like claimed by like the different battalions.
Mm-hmm.
Of those 5, which I may be wrong, it might be 4, but of those matches, the only one that is disputed by all the English-speaking sources that we used to research this topic for you guys, the only one that's disputed is the one the Germans won.
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
The British Army refuses to acknowledge to this day that a German battalion beat the Scottish Highlanders 3-2.
Not the Scotsmen.
Yet, and this is despite the fact that I want to say sergeant from the regiment that lost, I think about 40 or 50 years later, retold the story of how it happened. He was, in like 1960, he had lived. He was one of the few people from the Christmas Truce to survive, and he, 50 years later, was still insisting, no, they won 3-2 in the soccer match. And the British government's like, no.
I can't imagine
admitting that.
I can't imagine the British government hiding something in their past. Come on.
Yeah.
They're the British. Come on.
Yeah. Meanwhile, it's like it's a point of pride for the German battalions.
The rest of the world would like to know your location. No, that's see, we joke about it being a Christmas miracle, but you really have to imagine like what it was like for those soldiers. You're in the trench, you're in the shit. Like Colum said, the weather was awful. It was raining, it was cold, it was miserable. You're under the threat of dying at any point. And just for this moment of peace and clarity, it switched. The snowfall probably helped, and then the caroling. Like, I'm just imagining you're further down the line and you hear this coming as it's coming down.
Yep. And some places, there was, you could hear the gunfire in the distance too, and you were uneasy, but you still persisted, and that the willingness to take that risk. And then I'm reminded of I'm reminded of one of the stories of a truce had actually been brokered a little bit by the one of the commanding officers of the British and one of the commanding officers of the Germans had agreed that their lines would stop fighting, and they came out to meet.
Yeah.
And someone on the British side, their rifle misfired, and in response, the German lines, instead of firing on the point where the gun came from, fired on the nearest targets they could see, and they killed both of the officers' brothers, who had gone out with him to make this truce and make merry. And the truce held there, despite all that. The truce held, but it was definitely it was definitely not. It was more of a standstill than it was a peace, merriment. But the truce held. It was still that powerful, the unwillingness to just kill each other on Christmas.
I also think it's very valuable to point out the fact that the United States had yet to join in and had yet to just take things to that next level.
Yes, this war does not have United States backing for the British and French side until 1917.
Yeah. We get into the war pretty late, and this is really early on.
Again, through a conspiracy letter and the Mexico Papers, the Zimmerman letter.
Which everyone knew was never going to happen. Mexico was still probably hadn't truly recovered from the last war with America that it had, and it was probably not really looking to take its guns into Texas.
Not only just that, the war with America, which was what, 1840s, 1830s, yep. And then immediately after that, they had to deal with Napoleon and Maximilian's bullshit.
Yep.
The Battle of Puebla. Like, they were just starting to get their feet under them and, like, starting to really get established.
There was absolutely no... They were not in a position to have the imperial desire of retake California and Texas and all the rest of that.
Completely unfounded, but I thought it was an interesting perspective that perhaps the Zimmerman letter was faked and was forged by the British and French.
That's interesting. I don't believe it was forged. I do believe the letter I believe it was sent there as an intentional attempt to provoke America into fighting Mexico, as opposed to joining France and Britain in Europe.
Yeah. Because
at that point, it was pretty clear that the U.S. was arming for war, and it was pretty obvious whose side they were going to be on. But from the German perspective, better that America opens a new theater of war in North America than reinforces the existing one on the home front.
But instead, they're like, okay, well, to Europe we go.
Yep. Oh.
Incredibly crazy. Though I do like that the soccer matches have persisted when commemorating the Christmas Truce, since it is still, referenced and talked about and has been memorialized. The matches between, I believe it's British and German forces.
Yes.
Their current armies will have a soccer match.
Yeah. So much like how in America, the different branches of the military have their own football team.
Football.
In Europe, a lot of different branches of the military have their own soccer or football team. And so the army teams for both Germany and England played a commemorative match for the 100th anniversary of the truce.
Yeah.
Which was a big deal. I believe that was also accompanied by a memorial that was unveiled to the truce by Prince William.
Yeah. Good old Prince Willie.
Nothing bad to have been said about him. Or not dealing with modern politics.
Yeah, like
you got to be more worried about some of the other people in the family rather than Prince William. But...
Yeah, I know Meghan Markle.
Yeah. Whoa. Let's not go there, okay? Yeah, like we don't even know if Archie's a part of the royal family.
If he's the American peasant.
I was referencing Prince Philip and Prince Charles, but
okay, so you even missed out on the single most problematic royal, Prince Andrew. It's quite clear and well established that Prince Andrew liked.
I thought we were at the point where we stopped acknowledging his existence.
I was about to say, I honestly forget about Prince Andrew sometimes.
But see, my issue with Prince Andrew is Prince Andrew liked younger women. He liked real young women.
Yes, no. He's totally problematic. But when I think about the royal family, I'm thinking about the ones that are still in the news.
I feel obligated to point that out. You can't let that stuff slide.
All right. Anyway, back to Prince William, the commemoration. I think it's a good segue to just talk about a little bit about the legacy of this truce, and a little bit of why it's still important to talk about today. And since the truce began with singing, I think it's a fair fit that we talk a little bit about how it's been preserved in music a little bit. A number of songs throughout the past century plus have been written about this truce by varying generations. My personal favorite, and no, I do not get money from them, is the Royal Guardsman's Snoopy's Christmas from the 1960s, where even Snoopy in his sock with camel fighting the Red Baron both agree to a Christmas truce.
See, I'm a huge Beatles fan, so I'm more inclined to Paul McCartney's The Pipes of Peace. So, like, I don't know. Your Royal Guardsmen, do they compare to one of the best-selling musicians in all of human history?
Well, it is a song about the Peanuts comics, one of the best-selling comics in all history, so
Ooh.
we got double dipping here.
And then, of course, ye old metal Sabaton's about to release a new one talking about the Christmas truce later next year, right?
Yes. Next year, I believe it's set for February or March is the official release date for the album. Again, we are not paid by these people. The album is The War to End All Wars, and the song is aptly titled Christmas Truce.
No, but if Sabaton wants to send tickets our way, I would gladly go to another one of their shows.
Yes. If you notice any product placement, this is just a desperate call for us to be sponsored.
I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about.
I am out, but hold on, wait. Okay, I got an empty one.
How many more beverages can I drink? One of them
Yes.
has to like us.
Yeah. All jokes aside, like, there's a lot of music, a lot of artistic renderings. There's other mediums that were talked about as well. These are just songs. There's also poems that have been written.
Yes. So I believe one of the main people that wrote the poems, Robert Graves, like, embellished his poetry in his recounts.
Wait. No.
Well,
No war tales have ever been embellished, Gwendolyn.
It has been romanticized, but that's, I think, part of the beauty of this truth is it resonates with people, and it's something to believe in. It's a story worth telling, and for the most part, it's a true one, even with the embellishments.
Yes.
Yeah.
Even with the lenses of history changing, it's still being retold and retold over a century later, and that's something that's important, because what else is?
Yeah, I mean, and it's generally hard to not want to romanticize at least something, good when this war was so devastating. Though we tend to focus a lot on World War II when we talk about devastating wars because of everything that happened, but World War I was still, like, it wrecked people.
It was
Yep.
known as the Great
In
War for a
generations.
reason. It
Yeah.
was the greatest war fought up until
Yep.
that point.
Yeah, you don't earn the moniker "War to End All Wars" without doing something horribly, horribly wrong.
Yes, I mean, but it took out, like, generations, and then going into World War II, that also just taking out entire generations of young men and young
And
people.
to be honest, World War I was a catalyst for World War II because it was the Treaty of Paris initially that ended it, correct? But the treaty
It was Versailles. It was the Treaty of Versailles. Which is
but the Treaty of Versailles punished the Germans to such a high extent that it put them in economic turmoil, to the point where they had to pay more than they were generating in revenue as a country.
Yeah. Fun fact for those of you Americans here. So you would know from your basic history class that after World War I, there was a thing called the Roaring Twenties, where everyone was a millionaire.
No.
And then this thing called the Great Depression in the 1930s, where everyone was broke. Germany had no Roaring Twenties. From 1918 to World War II, it was just poverty. Insert caveat. Go.
I'm not trying to defend any of the actions or anything,
Blanket
but
statement.
yeah, blanket statement. but Germany really, they picked up their economy in the mid to late 30s. So like they almost went a reverse trajectory. Of course, the massive economic impacts worldwide really had an effect, but towards the later half of the 30s, they were employing more people, they were generating more. Granted, that was due to a buildup in militarism and nationalism. So, obviously there's really strong, terrible root causes, but while the U.S. was suffering, Germany prospered. Their Reichsmark was worth so much more, and yeah, it was the economic turmoil and then everything else.
As opposed to in the 20s, when the Reichsmark was more useful as wallpaper than it was as currency.
And also the fact that France really trying to stick it to Germany for causing the war, even though, of course, everyone was dragged in due to alliances.
Yep.
They punished Germany by making them pay reparations. They took a large chunk of the Rhineland, which is really...
they shut down the Ruhr Valley, wasn't it? Which was the Germany's industrial center.
But they also took a huge part of the land because it was rich in natural resources. So they did a huge land grab, made Germany drop all of their overseas land holdings. Like, it was a punishment to end all punishments, and instead it built this resentment, it built this hatred, and Germany had this like lost empire ideal built into them of like, look at what we lost, look at what we used to have. And that built a lot of nationalism, tying it all in together and expansion.
Yep. And
not only that,
please go. You go, Gwen. Go.
Not only that, but when you are in, economic instability and you're kind of, in this horrible place, really hitting rock bottom, you want someone to blame, you want something to blame, and it may not always being the past actions, and obviously you have France and other things, but this is also what really pushed forward the anti-Semitism, is because you want you kind of want a patsy for your anger. So that was another, you want a scapegoat, exactly, that's the word. And so that also really helped to fuel that, because people are much more likely to believe in these racist ideas and stereotypes and blaming when they're in hardship, and they just need a place to put their anger, because they know that it's there's not a ton that they can do to get out of that situation themselves.
Yeah, and just speaking of World War II and the consequences of World War I in relation to the Christmas Truce, there's a quote attributed to a German courier who survived the Christmas Truce all the way through the end of the war. Little known figure, Corporal Adolf Hitler. When he learned that the truce was happening on the part of the line his garrison was stationed at, he is reported to have exclaimed in disgust, "Where is your German pride?"
Oof.
In response to a truce that lasted from a single day to almost a week.
Yes, because you had till Boxing Day in some places.
You had till Boxing Day. Till Boxing Day. Some places didn't stop until New Year's, at which point command just ordered bombardment on anyone who was not in the trenches.
Yeah, but I mean, this Christmas truce, I believe in most places it did not, like, this wasn't like an annual thing. This was like a singular event, because of all the other things that happened in World War I after this, which is, again, I think it's why it's remembered so well.
Yes, overtures. Some people did attempt to make overtures in 1915, but at that point, command was ready for it and waiting, and there were much fewer attempts. Live and let live had kind of gone by the wayside by the next year, as chemical warfare had been introduced, and the casualties had begun to climb into the several million.
Jeez, yeah.
They really skyrocketed after that.
One little cliff note I want to put here is you look at the pictures and the videos of France to this day of where the trenches were, and you could see the scarring on the landscape. 100 years have passed, and the marks of this war are still being felt and still shown on the landscapes. Just kind of a dark little point, but like this feels like such a long time ago, but it really wasn't.
Yep.
No,
Yeah.
no.
How do you do, Willie McBride?
But as a perfect other segue, Christmas, we focus a lot on the Christmas Truce. There have been a lot of other really prominent events that have taken place on Christmas. I mean,
A lot connected to war too, surprisingly.
I mean, as an American, you know, we grow up saluting the image of George Washington guiding his troops across the Delaware River on Christmas Day.
It is midnight on Christmas on midnight. He crosses the Delaware and attacks a bunch of German hussars, I believe. Anyway, he attacks this German regiment under the British command and takes them captive. So once again, Germans, war, Christmas. How are we doing?
Not going well.
But this was like a really stark turning point in the war. This was when the tides really started shifting and changing because Washington had become this huge figure. In the early parts, pre-revolution, they were trying to lobby Washington to join them and to command their army because he was a revered British soldier back in his youth. And to the point where he's like, I don't want to, like, I don't know about that, to leading the troops and like rallying them against the British war machine. Like at this point, I think it's really important to emphasize the British military was at their might. There was no Navy greater than the British Navy.
Yeah, there was at the time of the American Revolution, the British Army effectively hadn't lost a war since taking on its form at that time, and it was considered the best army in the world. And one of the things that makes crossing of the Delaware, that victory, all the more significant is not just being on Christmas, not just this, semi-mythical figure in even his own time that is George Washington, but the fact that in 1776, that entire year was marked by British victory after British victory after British victory in the field. The colonial and continental armies spent their time running from British soldiers. And this impossible midnight crossing of a frozen river, this was the rallying cry that turned it all around for the next year.
This was that first wave of American pride of like, we stand up to this bully, we stand up against this oppressive force, and we really we truly believe in this cause, and we're willing to do this fool's errand. And it's kind of cool because that point becomes the rallying point and becomes the turning point. And then you start noticing smaller skirmish victories and the adaptation and adoption of skirmish warfare.
I mean, this is why you'll see a painting of this, dramatized in most, buildings and historical references.
Because God bless America.
It's it was the
don't America this right now.
it was the first impossible victory that America had as a nation, and you hear a lot more for callbacks to the Alamo, but this was the first really lightning strike focal point that, well, I'm going to say it, lit the torch of liberty, because screw the British Empire. I'm sorry.
Well, and speaking of impossible victories, not more than a couple of years later, the good old British came back. They did not take it lightly that the pesky Americans won their freedom, and now that they were done dealing with Napoleon's BS and his Bonaparte that they can truly dedicate themselves to the American war effort. And the War of 1812 broke out. And on Christmas in 1814, the treaty to end the war happened. And that was what, in Belgium?
Yeah, it was named after Ghent, Belgium, because that was the neutral site on which the talks were held, which I always do find a little bit interesting because this neutral site is off the coast of England.
To be fair, they signed the other one in Paris, so like,
yeah,
maybe the American delegation were like, OMG, European vacay.
Well, the Americans did like the French, especially at this time, as the French were our first and oftentimes only ally.
Fun fact, though, France was not the first country to recognize the United States. We have an ally earlier than France.
Are you going to leave us in suspense? Or are you
going to I was wondering if there are any guesses, but it was actually Morocco.
That would not have been one of my guesses.
They are the United States' oldest ally and the first country to officially recognize us. And, you know, real recognize real.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we go to Tunisia and we get all those songs about the coast of Barbary from the Marine Corps. Just like.
But the other thing that I find really interesting about the Treaty of Ghent is, one, it was signed on Christmas. But then, two, the greatest U.S. victory of the entire war happened after it was over.
Yes. Future President Andrew Jackson, Old Hickory. This document can't stop me because I can't read. Just takes out the British in the Battle of New Orleans.
To be fair, though, in their defense, travel was a lot slower and it took a lot of time, which is also why the treaty wasn't ratified until 1815.
Yes, it took several months. It took several months just to get a copy back to the United States of America so that our government could choose to acknowledge it.
War over. Let's go home.
A fun note about military victories and stands for the United States that happened after peace technically occurred. In the Revolutionary War, the siege of the fortress that inspired the Star-Spangled Banner, the national anthem of the United States, technically occurred after the fighting had been called to cease. No one managed to get the message to the particular fleet that was bombarding this one fortress.
Yeah, they got to get faster birds. I'm just saying.
Pigeons.
Well, you want to talk about fast? Then let's skip ahead to the USSR. Unfortunately, the Beatles will not be returning to the USSR because Christmas Day, Gorbachev resigned. December 26th, USSR fell.
1991. Yep. And a fun thing for you internet denizens, the lifespan of the USSR was 1922 to 1991, a rather, shall we say, cursed number on the internet these days.
How so? 1991?
91 minus 22. How long did the USSR last? Don't make me say it on the internet. Don't make me say it. Don't make me say it.
I am not very good at math because it is definitely taking me a minute.
Calculator.
No.
You're just like stalling math. You're like, okay, 19 minus 19, that cancels out.
Anyway.
It's the funny number. It's the funny number.
The USSR dissolves, and Boris Yeltsin takes over under the newly reformed nation of Russia.
Does that mean the U.S. won the Cold War and the space race and everything?
Speaking of the space race,
yes.
There's a
segue.
Segue. I'm not dealing with you anymore. An active human triumph did occur with the Apollo 8 mission on Christmas Eve, the Apollo 8 mission was the first time a human being had left the orbit of Earth and began to orbit the moon. It was the first time we saw the dark side of the moon, and it's the first time we encapsulated the globe.
I have that album over there, The Dark Side of the Moon.
Yep, encapsulated the globe, and it's on Christmas Eve. Apollo 8 broadcast what it saw back to Earth in one of the most watched broadcasts in history.
It's really interesting just how captivating the space race was. Like, a lot of children in that era, in the 60s, grew up admiring NASA because NASA really showed as the cutting-edge line of technology.
Well, not only that, but the space race also propped up education and furthering education. So the space race in the Cold War is the reason why so many people now can go to college and getting those grants and scholarships. Never mind how that got fucked up, earlier in the this century, but that was one of the reasons why we really furthered STEM and college graduates from all economic backgrounds, because Russia was beating us with their education system, and they're like, shit, well, if we're gonna be in space first and we're gonna do this, we need to really back up our citizens and their education, and that's why we have this push now.
And, sorry.
Oh no, go on.
I was going to say a fun fact with this push, and like your reference to NASA, kind of going by the wayside a little bit. The reason Apollo 8 orbited the moon is because the original mission was supposed to be a launch test for the lunar module of just, can we get this object into space and have it orbit Earth and come back down? The lunar module was broken. It had encountered some design flaws and some manufacturing delays. And so rather than scrap the mission or change the launch date, they just said, well, we've got this pod, let's throw it at the moon. And so Apollo 8 went to the moon when it was never meant to.
And one of the things that I think is really, really important to point out is one of the reasons the United States' space race was so successful is thanks to Katherine Johnson, who, if you're not aware, is one of the most badass women in all of history, because she is the reason that module managed to make it to the moon, and the reason why we were able to put people in space and on the moon, because she would do the calculations for all of their launches. They had massive computers that would crunch all these numbers, and this badass woman went through by hand and fact check the computers to make sure that their calculations were on point.
I mean, NASA had a whole section of women of varying races to do these calculations, and that is not pointed at enough. And they were definitely more trusted than the computers. And even when there was this push to lay them off, they started getting training on the computers so that you can go and reference and fact check them, because they knew those calculations so well.
And if she was not badass enough, she lived to be 101 years old, almost 102. Born August 26th, 1918, died February 24th, 2020.
And that is our tie back to the to World War I, as she was born in the last year of the war. So there you go, folks. Another name you might recognize. Another name you might recognize is a wonderful man portrayed by Tom Hanks. Jim Lovell was on the Apollo 8 mission. It was his prior flight to the fateful Apollo 13 mission. Unfortunately, he does never set foot on the moon. That was to be his Apollo 13 journey, but he made it there once, and it's probably a good chunk of the reason why he knew exactly what to do and how to get back.
Very helpful.
Yeah, I hear going to space helps with that. The other thing that I think I wanted to brush up upon briefly is the space race also led to some really interesting side inventions, because going to space provides a whole slew of new challenges. Two of the biggest ones that I really want to point out are the ballpoint pen. Because when you're in space, how do you write?
Oh my gosh.
Well, I hear the Russians brought a pencil.
And you want to know the issue with pencils? Pencils break, and you get chunks of graphite floating around in the air and in your system.
Yes, they do.
So the U.S. developed the ballpoint pen, which even in zero gravity would still flow, because well pens don't work without gravity or without like flowing ink. So that's where the ballpoint pen actually originates. And then my personal favorite is the Slinky.
Of course, you would bring that up.
Justin,
You're like,
please
revolutionary inventions, the Slinky.
get back.
Yes.
Justin, please get back in your time capsule to 1971 and stay there this time.
You're not supposed to really out me as a time traveler now.
It's okay. People will know. They'll be able to tell. Especially with your obsession with the Beatles. Yeah. To get back on the topic of Christmas events and not just space, because that could be a whole other thing.
That's a whole.
Is we were talking about, conquering and war being related to Christmas, and that we actually have, I believe, two that we looked up for this, coronations that happened on Christmas. Specifically the Charlemagne, which I did not know was in an actual name. I just knew it from a cartoon, which is saying a lot about me right now.
So, fun fact about Charlemagne, about what is it? Oh God, what's the statistic? Most of Europe is related to him, though.
I believe at this point, they did the math and they said, if you're of European descent, like full-blooded European descent, you are descended from Charlemagne.
Yeah.
Cool. I get multiple rows in my lineage.
Yeah. Everyone can trace their lineage. Though. Everyone can trace their lineage to Charlemagne if you're European.
All roads lead back to Charlemagne.
Yeah, it's more of a time thing than it is, my father's father's father.
I mean, same to be said with Genghis Khan.
Yeah.
He was crowned in 1800. I'm sure if you go far back, you can find things.
So fun fact about the name.
Or 800, not 1800.
Yeah. So 800 was the year that this coronation occurred, and just a little fun fact because Gwendolyn here didn't know his name existed. Outside the TV box, prior to this,
funny picture moving box.
Charlemagne is not a given name; it's more of a title, meaning Charles the Great.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is why you don't really see a Charlemagne II or anything like that, because only one may be great.
Well, he was called the father of Europe, so it's really hard to kind of live up to that.
Yeah.
I mean, also, you could tell that he was trying to set himself up for success, adopting the Roman Empire moniker, and with it really taking a lot of homage to Rome. And correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't the capital of the Holy Roman Empire? I know it was in Istanbul for a while, but wasn't there a second capital?
So the claims to be the next Rome started obviously with Rome. Then the second one was Constantinople, which kind of lost its claim following the Ottoman conquest. The third claim to be the second Rome was the Holy Roman Empire, and then the fourth claim was Moscow, as Russia was, with the fall of Constantinople, was the most powerful Orthodox church. Being second Rome, that's actually a big reason as to why the Pope, a man by the name of Leo III, gave Charlemagne the crown of Emperor of the Romans. At that time, the most powerful person in Europe was the Empress of Byzantium. And that's an orthodoxy state. And so by doing this, the Pope was hoping to get a Catholic on equal footing with an emperor, not just kings, but emperors. And it was a power play for him.
Yeah.
Didn't the populace of this empire that he built shift to Catholicism?
Yes, he was known for during his time conquering. He was known for a bit of a convert or die mentality. Forced baptisms were a thing for Charlemagne. He does calm down a little bit after being crowned emperor of the Romans, get into some laws and education reforms, as he's basically at that point trying to figure out how to preserve his empire among his children. He doesn't.
Yeah, that's.
But hey, the man conquered France, Germany, Italy, and all the countries in between.
Well, speaking of conquerors and conquering, that leads us into our second big coronation. This little guy by the name of what is that? William the Conqueror.
Do not do Scottish. I freaking will kill you. He's not William Wallace.
William the Conqueror.
Listen, I was so ready for you to be like, Bill? Yeah, do you know this man, Bill? Bill the Conqueror. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Like, his full name is William. I was so ready for you to go there.
Him and I are buddies.
Most people knew him as Bootstrap or Bootstrap Bill.
Oh my gosh, that's what it's from the Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yes.
You guys forget that I am a time traveler, so me and Bill, we hang out. We cut the Normans.
I have a fun story about this man. So this is a fun personal story that I wanted to tell.
You know him, bro?
So no, I'm not that old. Shut up. So William the Conqueror, he's crowned on Christmas in Westminster Abbey in the year 1066 after earning his name by conquering England. Mm-hmm. He's from Normandy, which is not England.
That is France.
So I was in London once upon a time, and I did a little tour of London. And my very British, ex-high school history teacher tour guide, he would speak of, these people, be they Roman emperors, be they William the Conqueror, which was mentioned by name, as he spoke of them as English, as from London. There were lots of fun things like our Emperor Tiberius and our King Will and our boy William the Conqueror. It's like no, William the Conqueror isn't called William the Conqueror because he is an Englishman who conquers other places. He's William the Conqueror because he's a Frenchman that conquers England.
That's my favorite thing too, especially with the English-French resentment that eventually boiled up. It's like,
oh my gosh,
but you descend from the French.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Half your language is ours.
Yeah. William the Conqueror is responsible for
language.
Yeah, 1/3 of all English words are French because this man.
I wouldn't say they're French. They're French derived. I want to make that small distinction.
Oh, pardon me, mademoiselle. I do not understand.
Pardon me, pardonnez.
Don't mess with me, guys. You're gonna hurt my poor French.
I am a monolingual man.
I took 4 semesters of French.
I have one semester of
in
Italian
college,
here.
or
I will destroy you.
In college.
I took 4 semesters of French in college, and I took 8.5 years of Spanish.
Well, which one is better? ?
So Spanish is a little bit easier and a little bit more straightforward, and it's definitely easier to grasp. French is kind of fun because then you get to mess around with the accent and trying to pronounce the words a little more accurate. And
whenever
of course,
you speak a language, you should try to do the pronunciation right, because that's normally more important than the grammar.
But that's also the best way to bug people who speak the language natively is you just butcher it horrifically, and they're like, "Stop, please! I will speak English."
I want someone to say Bordeaux the way it's spelled.
Bordeaux.
No. That's
Say it the
not
way
how
it's
languages
spelled.
work.
All right, we all know English is like the greatest, most, what's the word where like it sounds like it's written?
Phonetic, right?
Yeah, it's the most phonetic language of them all. There's absolutely no times when letters shift sounds randomly.
So that's because of the French. That's because of our boy Bill. He's the reason we have silent letters. Night? Come on. Night?
Meat.
There are silent
Yeet.
letters in other languages.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
bologna, lasagna.
To be fair, Gaelic and all its forms in Scotland and Ireland and all the rest of that place, and also just the Welsh, lots of silent letters.
Let's okay. We're not gonna get into Welsh. Okay, I've been to the longest place name in the world. I have been to the city where they have to add 4 extra signs to add the extra 35 characters of this town's name.
It doesn't exist. It can't hurt you.
It does, and I've seen it. I've been there.
You're like, I've been hurt, okay?
I've seen things. I was traumatized. But I think right there is probably a good point to wrap this all up and just say, like, think that's good for our first little foray into this. It got off the rails a little bit, but
a little tangential, but we still brought it back. Like Christmas is it's a very historic day.
Yep, I think we all
Not just religiously.
worked together well, and we got what we wanted to done. And if you enjoyed listening to us and watching us and want to see more of our shenanigans, well, we're on broadcast twice a month.
yeah. So kind of some housekeeping. That's what we're gonna try and aim for moving forward. Is we're gonna try and do bi-weekly. So we're gonna do every other week, 1 episode. If at some point it gets to where we're doing multiple episodes, we'll try and push like maybe 1 a week out down the line. But right now it's every other week. And if you have any comments or suggestions for future ideas, drop them in the comments below. This will be uploaded to YouTube. It'll be on your streaming platforms for podcasts. We'll have social media set up at Historical Humans. So be sure to give us a follow and to stay tuned for the next episodes, because this is going to be an adventure. It's going to be a wild ride. There's a lot that can be talked about. As you can see, we jumped around from the Battle of Hastings all the way to modern day and Soviet Russia. But if you guys liked what you saw, be sure to leave comments, drop a like, subscribe, do what you want to do, and we'll catch you all in the next episode.
See you then.